Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this Rubicon Models 28mm scale Bofors 40mm automatic gun. The illustration here almost looks like the gunner is about to throw his head back and laugh. Ha ha ha, he says. Maybe I'm just projecting what I would be doing if I got to fire one of these. Anyway, this is a plastic wargaming kit from Rubicon, and it can be used to build either a Mark I or Mark III version of the gun, as shown in the painting guide here on the back of the box. There's also some information and a 3D render of the model, complete with crew. Inside the box, there are two sprues which are, as I've come to expect of Rubicon, very nice and neatly moulded. The first sprue is mostly taken up by crew.
Are you going to be using those, Herbert?
I don't know. Stick around and find out. There's also some fairly thin and delicate looking bits here. You don't often see parts like this in Rubicon kits, or most wargaming kits really, for what are probably obvious reasons. The detailing is pretty good here. I'm no Bofors expert. I'm not even sure I'm saying Bofors correctly, but I do feel like the parts here are good and give a reasonably accurate representation of the real thing, especially for a wargaming kit with the compromises inherent to that. The moulding is good and neat, though there are going to be mould lines because there's always mould lines, so there will be a little bit of cleanup, but it's not too much. The ends of the gun barrels are slide moulded, so they look pretty good, and a lot more convincing than a flat-ended gun, or one that I've had to drill out myself. There are two gun barrels for some reason, I guess one is a spare. I don't recall seeing it mentioned in the instructions at all. Speaking of instructions, here they are. Pretty much exactly what I would expect to see with a Rubicon kit, which is a good thing. The instructions are clear and easy to follow. They point out where things shouldn't be glued, and what should go first, and which steps are for which version, like manual controls versus electric controls. Very good. Let us use these instructions to guide us in the gluing together of these bits of plastic. First, I build the frame, or is it the base? Whatever it is, these two pieces are glued together like so. I did my best to eliminate the gaps at the ends, though they did end up being a bit of a problem. Then I take the top of the base and glue this bit onto it. That assembly is then glued onto the bit we put together just before. It did need a little bit of pressure to minimize gaps, and I would suggest leaving this to bond for a while before continuing. Next, I add the folding arm things, which is probably the technical term. This is just a matter of sandwiching the outer arm bits onto the base. You can either glue them into place now or leave them movable. The position you would glue these in depends on if you want to build yours in the deployed position or the transport position, and now seems like as good a time to make that choice as any. I've chosen deployed. Next, I add feet, which is definitely what they are called. These are simple, and there's one for each end of the base. These seem like they should be a bit shorter if you're building the transport version, but I didn't think about that too hard because I'm building mine deployed. You can also probably see why I suggest leaving parts to bond properly. I applied some pressure and lifted the top of the base here. Not a real problem, just a minor annoyance, but it is avoidable. Of course, I stream these builds, so it doesn't really work to sit there waiting for glue to completely bond. Anyway, it's wheel time, and these wheels are really easy to put together, though you do have to be careful. There are two different kinds of wheels here, and the keying will allow you to mix those up a bit, which I might have done. The wheel with the long axle mounting thing on it only has the tyre part on the back. The one without the long mount has what I'm assuming to be brakes in the middle. You can put them together wrong one way but not the other, so you would basically end up with two wheels where you need four. Before we can put these wheels on, we need some mounts for them. These parts are the same if you're modelling the deployed or transport version. They just go on at different angles, and there's keying to help you get those angles correct. Putting the parts on is not difficult, but there is a bit of play to them, so you'll need to do some nudging to get them nice and straight. This is another point where I would suggest leaving the parts to bond properly. I install the wheels next, and you can probably see why it's a good idea for the wheel mounts to have some strength to them. Strength that you don't really get until the glue has bonded. It can still be put together like this, of course. It is the way I did it. You just might have to hold the wheel mounts and nudge everything back into place once the wheels are on. I follow that with the towing mechanism, I guess you might call it. This isn't difficult to place, but if your wheels and their mounts aren't glued solidly in place, it might be a bit more challenging to apply pressure if you need to. At the rear, I add this thing, which I'm assuming is for towing a limber or something like that. Or maybe it's a lock for the gun. I clearly have no idea. I use the work surface to help get the positioning right, so it looks like it's resting on the ground instead of hovering in the air. At the front end, I attach this drawbar, and I've got this hanging downwards at what I think is a convincing angle. That's how the instructions show it, but the box art has it sitting horizontally. Which is correct? I don't know, but I think the way I've done it looks a little bit better. Anyway, that's the carriage done. Would you call it a carriage? I don't know. It's time to work on the shooty part though. The central part of the gun is a nice single piece, so there's no need to worry about getting the gun lined up straight or anything like that. It gets sandwiched between the two outer parts, though as far as sandwiches go, it's not very appealing. It does look pretty good as a gun though. I quite like those little openings through which you can see the detailing on the gun barrel. It's pretty neat. Next we have to add the gun to its mounting, which was a little bit fiddly. I ummed and ahed about the recuperator cylinders, and it seemed like they should remain horizontal even when the gun is elevated like I wanted it to be, so that's how I glued them on. I then kajigger the other side of the mount into place. It's not the most difficult thing in the world, though it doesn't just drop into place either. This is where you decide on the elevation you want your gun to have. I want mine to be firing into the air, possibly at some sort of aircraft, or maybe just for fun. Next, I glue together this thing, which seems to be some sort of ammo holding device. It gets mounted on the right side of the gun here. I assume it's some sort of ready rack type thing, so somebody can stand there dropping more ammo into the gun, while others bring it over. There was also a cover that goes over the ammo in the gun, which I'm assuming is for transport mode. I obviously know very little about these guns, but it seemed kind of silly to have that cover on while it was in use, so I've left it off. Now it's time to build the non-shooty components of the gun. This bit goes on here, and I assume this has something to do with the elevation mechanism, and it's simple enough to get into place. Over the top of it, I put the main gun. This is another area where it would be a little bit easier if the glue had bonded first. Again, it's not a huge issue, and you can still get everything into place, you just might need to do a bit more kajiggering. It's at this point we need to decide if we want electric or manual controls. I don't know if electric is specific to the Mark III or if both versions can have it, but I'm building an electric Mark III, so I use the electric doodaddery, which includes this thing, and I had a bit of difficulty in getting this into place. The guide pins that should go into the floor part just didn't seem to want to go in. My solution was to just cut them off. Easy. It did mean that I had to eyeball the position, but there was still one guide pin, so it's not especially challenging. It's mostly just a matter of lining the part up so that it's parallel to the gun. I follow that with this thing on the rear of the floor part. I guess it might be cleaning rods or something like that. Then, on the right side, another electrical control thingy, and like the other one, I had to give it a bit of surgery to get it to fit, so there was also some more kajiggering, but that's okay, it went on in the end, and it looks correct. The gun shields come next, and while I don't think it specifically calls it out in the instructions, I believe these are optional. I've seen many pictures of these without the gun shields, including the box art. They're not too hard to put on, and I've certainly encountered trickier gun shields. There's a couple of mounting points that are pretty easy to find. The tricky part was to get the support bar thing into place. Not that it was insanely difficult, but it did take a lot of fiddling. On the left side, I decided to try installing the support bar first, and while it did still need a bit of fiddling, I would say this is the easier way to put it together, if only slightly. A way to aim the gun seemed like a pretty reasonable idea, so I put together this gun sight. This is the Mark III version. It's got a little bit more to it than the Mark I, but not much. It's pretty simple to put this together, though you should probably take a bit of care with it. These parts are thin, and while I didn't break any, I can see it being easy enough to do. Once everything looks like it's together nice and straight, it's probably not a bad idea to let it sit and bond. It can then be installed here atop the gun. It made sense to me that it should be facing the same way as the gun, otherwise inaccurate fire may occur. Obviously it is only a model, so it doesn't have to be dead accurate, but I did my best to get it looking right. And now that the gun is completed, it seemed like a good idea to join it to the base. The fit was a bit tight. If you want to leave this loose and have it freely rotating, you might like to sand down the pin where it joins the base. I'm going to glue it all together, so that's not really an issue for me. The tight fit did mean that I had to apply a little bit more force to get it together than I really wanted, but nothing went wrong, so that's nice. Anyway, now for something completely different, or at least a bit unusual for a Herbert Erpaderp video anyway. I'm going to build crew figures. This guy has a big butt crack. I think this is actually a really good way to mount a crew figure to a seat. It looks a lot more convincing than just plopping the figure into the seat. I then add the left arm, which also has the control crank attached. We need this to line up with the gun, and it would be nice if it was keyed to ensure an exact fit, but it's not. My solution was to put the figure into his position, then kajigger the arm so the crank lines up with the gun, and leave it there to bond. It did, of course, take a bit of fiddling, but it's not too hard, and it should result in a convincing looking figure that looks like he's interacting with the gun. Once that's bonded properly, the other arm and head are really simple to attach. The other gunner is pretty much exactly the same, except the hand holding the crank is on the other side. The loader figures are a little bit easier to put together, or at least we don't need to sit them on the gun to line anything up. The arms holding the ammo are a little bit tricky, it just takes a bit of kajiggering to make them look convincing. This guy looks like he's about to take a big bite out of that ammo. They mustn't feed him very well. Anyway, the Bofors 40mm automatic anti-aircraft gun in 28mm scale from Rubicon Models is now completed. I'm very happy with this. It's a nice model, and it was a lot of fun to put together. A little bit more fiddly in places than the usual Rubicon model, but that's not a bad thing at all. It did take me a little bit longer to build than I expected. I think it was about 3 hours, but of course most of it was done on stream, so that does involve a bit more faffing about than just sitting there and concentrating on building. It's not a race, of course, it's about enjoying the build, at whatever pace you happen to go at, which is what I did. There's a couple of extra boxes of ammo included with the kit, which would be useful if you were going to put this on a base, and I think I might do that. It does seem like a fun thing to do. I will leave the ammo on the sprues until I've decided that I'll do that though. I don't want to lose them. I do have some minor complaints with this kit, mostly that there are some gaps at the end of those base leg things. You can probably see them right now. I would say that those gaps are, if not entirely my fault, at least mostly my fault. Letting the glue bond properly here might have given a better result. It's not going to be hard to fix with putty, but you can avoid putty by doing things better while building, like taking your time and being patient. It could be worse though, and the rest of the model looks amazing. I'm not sure how much you really need anti-air in games like Bolt Action, but if your British force needs something to deal with planes, this seems like a good choice. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comment section below. If you'd like to watch me build kits like this one live, go check out my Twitch channel, which is where I stream pretty much everything you see on this channel. The link is in the description below. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon here on YouTube because reasons, I guess. And if you'd like to see my videos a bit early, before there's any ads, and take part in polls and things like that, consider becoming a patron. You can find links to Patreon and all my other things like Discord and social media in the description below. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.